Hi, everybody. I want to welcome you to the Resident and Family Support Council meeting that is sponsored by the Illinois Long-Term Care Ombudsman Program in conjunction with the Illinois Pioneer Coalition, who allows us to use their Zoom account so that we can host these meetings for everybody. So today, we've got a really great conversation to happen about senior scams. So we'll get into that in just a minute. I just wanted to give a couple of people some reminders. Remember, we always do this on the first and the second Tuesday of every month at 3 o'clock. And the link that took you to today's meeting is the same link that takes you to every single meeting that we have all the time. So no, you could share this link with your friends. You can share this link with anybody at all so that you can get into these meetings. We have our variety of different topics, always about information to empower people. So we can really feel that we are navigating this path of long-term care and even just living a good life as we age. And that's the purpose behind all of this. We record all of our meetings. They're on YouTube. I just saw that Stephen, my handy cohort here, it has put the link in for the YouTube meetings to be able to access the recordings of those. So check them out because we have, like I said, a litany of information on those. I see that we're at 99 people right now, and our account unfortunately only allows for 100 people to come in. So if you have two people that are on it at the same time, if somebody could log out, that would be great, because if you're just sharing it in a room together, one of you log out and go sit at the other person's computer, that would be great, just to be able to allow more people to be able to come into the meeting, because I know today's going to be really important information, and personally, I am really excited about hearing it. I even have my mom listening to it because it's something that we all need to hear. So with that, Debbie, I'm going to go ahead and introduce you. But first of all, I'd just like you to tell us a little bit about who you are, Debbie, so that we can get an idea of who you are and why this topic is so important to you.
Sure. I'm actually what they call a crime victim advocate, and I'm retired from doing that for the FBI. They have positions in every FBI office called victim specialists. And we work with the agents that are investigating crimes that are being investigated by the FBI. Before that, I worked out at U.S. Attorney's Office doing the same thing, and sometimes district attorney's offices. So again, over 40 years, I think I've worked with every kind of crime that you could imagine. While I was with the FBI, I did a lot of human trafficking, a lot of child pornography, bank robberies, investment frauds, terrorism, just the kinds of things that we're investigating every day. But one of my specialties was working with victims of what I call these transnational frauds. And we didn't do many of these cases, but what we did made me recognize that these really are often forgotten or invisible victims and invisible crimes, because oftentimes it's not seen that there's someone to arrest because the criminals are overseas. So when I retired, or I call myself unleashed, about 4 years ago, I decided, and it was based on a promise to these victims, that I would do everything I could once retired to try to assist in this effort and be a voice for them and do everything I can to get these crimes stopped and recognized.
Oh, Debbie, this sounds like, it sounds like it's important to you. And I know that there's so many people on this call that it's important to them too. So we're really looking forward for you sharing this information. So thank you. And thank you for your mission. So we're excited to hear everything.
Okay. So you ready to go now?
Yep, go ahead. Go for it.
Okay. And you guys can see my slides, right?
Yep, we can.
Okay, great. Okay. And I'm sorry for the delay. I was actually on for like 15 minutes and thought I was alone. So I had my own meeting going, which went pretty well, actually. So again, I'm here to talk to you about invisible victims and invisible crimes. And we only have about 50 minutes, I think, to do that. And I wanted to take some questions. So we're going to go pretty fast in this. I will be making my slides available to the professionals that are on this team. So, or actually all of you are welcome to have it. So, feel free to make use of those if I go a little fast on something. And your ombudsman or your local people there will also have them available for them to use and refer to. All right, so it's going to be kind of a data dump, but I think it's important, and it's the only way to get the message out because there's so many of these frauds out right now.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thanks.
Yes, so the first commercial I kind of want to do on this, and actually, oops, there we go. this is my biggest commercial, and there's only 2 or 3 things that are most important. And this is one of my favorite things to talk about. And this could be on every residential care community website, every police department, every adult protective services. This is the National Elder Fraud Hotline. And if you know someone age 60 or over, they have access to people that speak over 60 languages there to help interpret. They will help people file complaints with the Federal Trade Commission or the FTC that we'll be talking about later. But it's a wonderful resource, and it's run by the government. The U.S. Department of Justice kind of sponsors it through their Office for Victims of Crime. So I really urge you to keep this number available, have it available to all your residents. It really is a one-stop place for people to get the help that they need if they even think they're involved in some kind of these frauds or scams. All right.
So Debbie, if you don't mind,
Yes.
I'll be interjecting some questions as we talk
Sure.
about this. With this number, so if you were somebody who was already a victim of fraud, would you say, and even if it happened in the last couple of months, would you say that we
Yes,
should call that number to report it, so
definitely.
that just to make people aware?
It's reported if it was even 6 months ago or whatever. If you need the help and you
Okay,
feel the urge to help report it, I'm going to be giving you resources to be able to report it other places on your own. But this would be a place to get the help and support and information. And if you have trouble filing a report on your own, they can do it on your behalf. And it
wonderful,
doesn't matter
wonderful.
how old the fraud is. Okay.
Great. That's really important because I know some people who have been taken by fraud. And so
Yes.
I will definitely be referring this number off to them. So thank you.
It's a great resource. The second one, and this is more for the professionals, but I wanted to make sure I get this kind of commercial in. We actually do a monthly NAPSA, and NAPSA is the National Association of Adults and Protective Services. And we do a scam forum on the fourth Thursday of both months for professionals who work with older adults or adults with disabilities who are victims of these kinds of things. And we kind of do like a little 20 minutes on trends or recent frauds. And then the rest of the time is working with these professionals and people sharing the cases or the challenging victims that they're working with, or something where they just don't know what to do next. And we all kind of share that information with each other. So I wanted to kind of put a plug in for that because we're doing that kind of nationally. And it's been really helpful, I think, in helping people in the field. So that's kind of my commercial on that. And then we're going to get into this. So I talked a little bit about these transnational frauds. And one of the issues that we have is that, our technology in dealing with fraud has changed. I remember my grandparents talking about the real early days and how when they go into town, they were farmers. So when they went into town, they kind of knew which stores had scales that, when they measured flour or different things, which scales were kind of faked and, had maybe special weights in them. So they knew to stay away from those kinds of things. So, and that's kind of the early days of fraud, at least here in the United States, or there were hucksters coming in trying to sell their snake oil medical things. And we've kind of moved beyond that, with things like radio and TV that could advertise different things that might not have been real, to using the telephone. And now we've evolved so much because it's evolved not just to the phone, but of course to the internet, social media, and the whole world of crypto and artificial intelligence. So I kind of, instead of using the word scam, I often will use technology facilitated fraud to know that these kind of frauds evolve as the nature of the technology does. And one of the ways that's evolved is in the early days, if someone was going to so-called scam you, they probably had to be pretty local to you. And that's not the case anymore. Most of the criminals that operate in what we call these transnational frauds aren't even in the same country as the victim they're in. So you might believe that you're dealing with someone who's talking to you about winning maybe the Publishers Clearinghouse lottery, or you might believe that you're dealing with a soldier who's maybe overseas or on an oil rig somewhere. But chances are these people are really operating out of a foreign country. And you're also dealing with, unknowing to you, is an organized crime ring, because these people don't usually operate as just one or two people. There's a whole criminal enterprise behind them that the victims don't really know about. So that really is going to make investigations and arrests or getting your money back difficult, because we can't make arrests in foreign countries. We have to rely on local police departments to do that. So to the extent that, these things are transnational, it's really dangerous when you don't know that that's really what's going on, because again, you don't really know who you're dealing with. And it's not like a credit card purchase where you buy a product and it isn't what you expected and you can, cancel that credit card item. on these kinds of frauds, you really are sometimes left holding, some serious things that can happen to you. So the first fraud fighter tip that I want to talk to you about, we'll be talking about a few of these today. The Federal Trade Commission, actually, we kind of think that most of these frauds are happening over the internet now or social media, but the Federal Trade Commission has been reporting that the phone was the second highest way that fraud criminals are targeting victims. So the phone is still can be kind of a dangerous weapon as well as a way to communicate with family and friends and loved ones. So my big message on this one is only pick up the phone from numbers that you know and trust or in your phone directory if it's on a cell phone. You can't trust caller ID anymore. That used to be a means that when we did fraud prevention kinds of talks, we'd say use caller ID. But caller ID isn't always going to work for you now because these fraud criminals know how to use caller ID to basically scam people. So they can impersonate the IRS. They can impersonate your police department. They can impersonate Social Security. They can impersonate your bank. And it might show up on caller ID as being in the IRS, and it's really not. So what we really want you to do is let your calls go to voicemail, and then you can screen your calls and you can choose whether to call back or do more research to make sure that you're using the right number by looking at an old bill or a bank statement or something, and you're not using the number provided by that person on the phone. We're getting a lot of these Medicare kinds of things where people are posing as Medicare providers of some kind. There might be lending agencies. All of these kinds of things are really dangerous. Don't trust them. There are anti-scam call blockers available that you can contact to get on, and those can be really helpful. The other thing that I kind of want to mention is a lot of people will say to me, and if I was seeing you all in person, I'd say, how many of you have signed up for the do not call list? And a bunch of you would be saying, oh, Debbie, that doesn't work. We've tried that. I still get those calls. But that's just the point, because what happens is the do not call list is not going to stop those kind of telemarketing calls. But what it actually is doing is the people that get through are the scammers. So what happens is do not call list is not a block. It's actually like a directory that businesses and other agencies are supposed to look at before they make a phone call to you. So the problem is if you're getting calls from people, whether it's a local person to fix your roof or somebody that's doing landscaping or, again, lending kinds of things, people that are going to help you with a mortgage, they're actually not on the do not call. They're not looking at the do not call list to see that you're on there. And so you can assume that that is a fraud criminal. So I wanted to make sure that you are aware of that. We can't place a block being with the government, but it's a directory that, again, real businesses look at and therefore will not call you. So it actually does work in ways that people just don't really understand. The other thing, as I want to talk about before we get into the frauds, is avoiding victim blaming. One of the worst things that I see happening now to my fraud victims is the way that they're treated so much differently than victims of violent crimes or other kinds of crimes. Everybody is susceptible to fraud. There's just going to be different frauds for different people and ages. If you're younger, we know that the people that report, we know that younger people are actually victimized more than older people. But older people seem to have more money stolen from them when they report their frauds. But the frauds are different. For younger people, it might be romance and crypto investing or job scams, applying for a job, those kinds of things, or money, buying something online that didn't happen. With older folks, we're going to talk about the kinds of things that happens to people of different ages. So we really want you to avoid victim blaming and shaming, because these make reasons why people don't report. And it's really important that they do, and also that they can get the support that they need. So we want to promote victim self-esteem and their resiliency. We want to start a conversation if you know someone that this has happened to. I'm so sorry that this happened to you. How can I help? Again, avoid that victim shaming and realize it's the criminal that's at fault. So one of the things that I see a lot of times is headlines in newspapers or online media: victim fell for this scam, or they had this money was lost. The money wasn't lost. The money was stolen. The victims were not conned. They didn't fall for it. They weren't duped. They were manipulated and they were robbed. So let's change our language to start using those kinds of words. The person was manipulated into doing these kinds of things. And instead of that, we're going to talk about the fraud criminals. And we're going to say fraud criminal stole this amount of money from this victim of a romance crime or whatever. But don't put the emphasis on the victim and making it look like they were stupid or gullible or greedy. Really important things to kind of keep in mind.
Debbie, I really think that that message that you just shared is really important for us all to hear because so many people, I think, do feel that they were, taken advantage of, and then they're embarrassed about it. So they're even reluctant to sometimes even share it with their own families.
Exactly.
And I'm thinking of an elderly gentleman that I know, my girlfriend's father, who was victimized by, a criminal who took advantage of him, and he doesn't want to talk about it. It's that shame. There's shame around it, and he should not be the one that is shamed on this. It should be the people who did it to him. And I think that that's such an important message that you are sharing right
It
now. I
is.
mean, our meetings are about empowerment, and this is definitely an empowering opportunity right here for people to hear this. So
And
thank
even
you.
changing our words, like you didn't lose the money. I sometimes, if again, if I'm in person, I'm looking around, the victims lost it. Where did they lose it? No, the money was stolen from them. So even on that basic level, we really need to change our language. They're kind of treated the way rape victims were. I was working in victim services in the early 80s, and we've done such a good job of not blaming victims of those kind of crimes. I really think that we need to kind of move and address these issues on these crimes as well, because it's happening just to so many people,
So
and they're
true.
not
So
coming
true.
forward, or they try to come forward and don't know who to report to. So that's what we're talking about on this crime. So in
Mhm.
addition to reporting to the police, and perhaps in your state it's Adult Protective Services, it might be the state attorney general, you want to report to your ombudsman, because they're going to be hopefully really helpful people to help you navigate some of this kind of stuff and coach you through it. But also, I'm urging you to report it to the Internet Crime Complaint Center, which is run by the FBI, and to the Federal Trade Commission. And basically, if you're kind of going, that's a lot of work, Debbie. If it's an internet fraud, please report it to the Internet Crime Complaint Center. If it's let's say, a phone fraud, you can report it to the Federal Trade Commission if you only want to do one. And again, if you have trouble reporting, because we're actually asking you to go back and visit your crime scene to ask other victims to report it kind of on their own, usually comes out. If you report it to these national databases, it actually goes beyond the police department, and it's available to any sworn law enforcement officer in the United States. So there might be a detective in Miami, there might be a postal inspector in San Diego, there might be a FBI agent in Chicago, and they're all kind of investigating the same fraud criminals or scammers. And the more victims that they can find and verify, the more likely that is to lead to a bigger case where maybe it'll be accepted by an assistant U.S. attorney, and maybe they can work with local law enforcement in another country, or maybe they find out that there's money mules or people that are part of that criminal organization here in the United States that they can work on arresting. So again, reporting to these national databases with as much data as you can about the perpetrators, putting in every wire transfer, every gift card transfer, all the information about the scammers that you know, is really, really important. And that's a really good way of being a fraud fighter. You want to download or print a copy because you won't be able to retrieve it. And again, I want you to think of this as a library of complaints that's accessible to law enforcement. In addition, the FBI has what they call a RAP team, and that's kind of a recovery asset team. So if you have a large amount of money that was wired by a bank, the sooner, if you can report that within 48 to 72 hours, as well as notifying your bank, they are able to do sometimes something called a financial fraud kill chain, where they can actually reverse that and sometimes get your money returned. That doesn't happen on the smaller amounts yet, but it is something that's important to know. If you've done, 20, 50,000, something like that, get in touch with that FBI, the IC3, and contact your bank right away, and that money might be able to get stopped. So I wanted to mention that real quick. Very important to make these reports. A
Yeah.
real,
So
go
so
ahead.
really, the reason why we would want to make a report is so that they get information to keep it from happening to other people.
That's one reason, but also it might lead to an investigation on your own case.
Okay.
We had a man,
Okay.
I had to really beg him to, because I work with a lot of victims themselves, and he really was going to me, I don't see the point, Debbie. And I said, well, then just do it for me. He had, over 50,000 stolen in two different frauds. 2 years later, I got an email from him saying that his case, because he filed that IC3 report, was going to be investigated by somebody who was a detective with the New York High Tech Crime Task Force. And he gave me an address. And of course, my first thought was, oh no, this is a scam. But sure enough, I checked into it, and he did have a case. And it was because that investigator was looking for additional victims to build on that case. So again, very, very important. You might not hear anything at all. You might hear something weeks or months later, but it's important to report.
Okay, thank you.
And then real quick on these, and I'm just going to go in just a brief detail on this. This is the Federal Trade Commission and the IC3 come up with every year kind of their annual stats. And that's another reason for reporting. As you can see, last year, what was reported, and we know most people do not report. So this is just the top of the iceberg kind of thing. Over $10 billion was reported, not lost, but stolen by people. Over 2.6 million fraud victims filed reports. And again, if you look at the bottom of this, it says that we know this is a change too. Emails, it used to be text messages. Now emails are the #1 ways that people are reporting that they were contacted by a fraud criminal, and phone calls were second. Social media had the highest overall losses on this, but you can kind of see what's going on. Investment frauds, prizes, and sweepstakes are also really high on this list. This is the FBI report. It was over a year old. I just wanted you to see this one because it talks about 2 crimes that are really seeing a lot of, and we're going to talk about. And one of those is tech support frauds. They had 17,800 victims reported. Again, most victims don't report. Also investment frauds, huge kinds of things. Sometimes it's associated with a romance. We're going to talk about these. Sometimes it's a payment method. It is the largest losses of any age group reported to the FBI, with an increase over 300% from 2021. And look at the average amount stolen from older adults, $35,000. Over 5,400 victims reported more than 100,000 stolen from them. So this is a crime. I call it the crime that keeps giving. And another reason why it's important to report.
And that's the average amount, over the $35,000. That's
right.
a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
That's a lot of money.
So criminals, a lot of people say, well, how do they get my information? You know, I'm not doing anything. Maybe I'm not even on social media, or I'm not on the web. Well, they do things. They can make purchases on the dark web, and we'll talk about that, or trade with each other. There's data breaches. I think Target had a very famous data breach months ago. If you're on 23andMe, they had a more recent one. MGM hotels, sometimes medical providers, all these breaches where scammers will go into a business and be able to somehow gain access to some of their data, and that they have available online on their customers. And sometimes that is how information is gotten. Call centers are a big one, where many of our call centers are now in places like India and Jamaica. And those can be places where employees or former employees steal some of the information in those call centers, and then have that information to kind of target people. And then public records, getting things through the mail, social media, answering surveys, especially online, repeat victims, and cold calling them, all are ways that criminals obtain information from us. So I just wanted to go through that. How much money they get from stealing data on the dark web, I just real quick, you can see a cloned Visa with a PIN number, $20 for one of those. A US driver's license, they can get up to $150. So if you're involved with a romance scammer and this man or woman is telling you that, you know, they need to have your driver's license number, and you forward a copy of that or text it to them, you could be causing all kinds of problems, and a way for them to earn a whole bunch of money just by giving them your driver's license. So I kind of wanted you to see that. And again, look at the email data dump. 10 million US emails addresses go for $120 right now. And think of the 10 million Americans that they could then try to target in different kind of email frauds. So very dangerous. This is a really important one too. These are the common tactics. And I think if there's no other slides, the next 2, in addition to the National Elder Fraud Hotline, are probably the most important. And the red flags that we really want to watch, no matter what kind of fraud it is that they're going to do, or scam that they're going to do to you. It usually starts with an unexpected contact by a stranger, sometimes impersonating a government or a business. Now, this unexpected contact can be by mail, it can be by phone, it can be over the internet through text or emails, it can be on social media. Those are usually the ways. It can be in person even, but it's an unexpected contact. There's going to be a demand or a request for money or personal information, or even a request for a relationship, which you might meet somebody on Facebook or a dating site or LinkedIn or Scrabble, Words with Friends. There's also going to be often a demand for urgency or secrecy with this, that you've got to act fast. You know, that offer is only going to be available for a short time. You know, you have that chance to win that publisher's clearinghouse, but don't tell anyone. Secrecy is a big part often of what they do. There's often a threat or an enticing offer, a lot of attention and flattery, especially in the case of like lotteries and romance frauds. A threat, especially if it's a family emergency, a grandparent scam, that leads to your heightened emotional state. And that's what these fraud criminals want to get you in, so that you're not thinking rationally and you're going to move out of panic or fear or excitement to act faster than you normally would, to take time to stop and review and maybe research or talk to somebody else before you do it. There's usually going to be a demand for a particular type of payment, and we're going to talk about that. And it might involve financial grooming, where that person that you're talking to, especially maybe if it's a lottery or a romance fraud or an investment fraud, they're going to ask for a small amount of money. Basically, they might have an emergency of some kind, and it might lead to the theft of larger and larger amounts that end up until all of your assets are stolen and more. So that's what you can kind of expect. Whoops, I actually, yeah. And what happened there? Let's go back to where we were. Sorry about that.
Oh, no
So
problem. This is
this is
also
the payment methods that people use, the criminals use, and we'll go quickly over those because I want to get into the scams, the frauds they do. Wiring money, we still see happen a lot. That can be the Western Union MoneyGram, but also wire transfers from bank to bank. We're seeing reloadable or a debit and gift cards. Gift cards are huge. Gift cards are used to celebrate someone's birthday that you know, or a Christmas present, or giving something to a grandson. But it's someone you know. If anybody online or on the phone tells you you need to make a payment by a gift card, hang up the phone, disengage social media, disengage emails, whatever. That's a scammer. More and more people are asking, these scammers are asking to participate in peer-to-peer. That's things like Zelle or Venmo, PayPal, or they're using QR codes to get the money. So be careful of those too. We're also still seeing cash happening. I had a client recently that ended up sending money stuffed inside a stuffed animal and a magazine sent to another country because she thought that I think the customs wouldn't look at it as much. Fake checks are still a big one, or overpayment, where you might think that you're buying a puppy somewhere and there's an overpayment and then they just say, oh, well, just send me the amount back. And you find out that that check was bad. There's a lot of victims, and if got your postal guy on here, he can talk to you probably a lot about the reshipping kinds of things where they will actually send equipment, send packages to your home, usually purchased with stolen credit cards, and ask you maybe as a business thing or a favor to them to reship it to somebody else. What you're involved in then is kind of a form of not money laundering, but package laundering. We'll talk about that. Cyber currencies and Bitcoin ATMs are huge now. We'll talk about that on the next slide, and money mules, and we'll go into that as well. So these are the kind of ways that these fraud criminals will demand or try to get money from you. So this is what a crypto machine looks like. And you find them in gas stations, you find them in liquor stores, neighborhood delis, maybe smoke shops, all these kinds of things. If you take a look, I wasn't even paying any attention to them until victims told me about them. And now I see them everywhere. You can actually go on this coinatmradar.com and you can see how many there are within even a 10-mile radius of your home. I do that sometimes on presentations. And sometimes there's 10 or 20 within a 10-mile radius. So they're all over the place. Increasingly, states are starting to regulate them a bit, which I think is good. But I have a victim that recently sent over $300,000 into various crypto machines and a crime we'll talk about a little bit later. And she did this for 2 or 3 hours, just putting in $100 bills, thinking that she was saving her money from a bank account. So be careful of these, anybody that's asking for a payment through crypto. Fraud fighter tip, really important when you're dealing with banks. It's real important to try to share an account information. If you can have someone that is on your account that you trust, that's a really good thing, and someone that can watch in real time, especially if amounts that are large. If you can get information to know right away, perhaps on your cell phone, or someone you trust, a son or a daughter, a grandchild, to be a part of that and get notice of your accounts. If you don't have that, consider what they call a trusted contact person. I kind of think of it as an emergency contact, that person can be notified if for some reason they can't reach you, or if for some reason you're doing, let's just say, things that don't fit your normal pattern of banking. They won't have access to what's in your account, but they can be contacted if it seems like there's something that you're doing that maybe someone in your family or a friend, trusted friend, needs to know about. So we're encouraging people of all ages to actually have this on now. They're doing it with retirement accounts much more than bank accounts, but there's a big push to get this in all kinds of accounts. So keep that in mind. We're going to talk about this. There really is a fraud for everyone. The ones I have listed here are the ones we're kind of going to talk about a little bit today, or at least some of them. But I want you to think about artificial intelligence. You might have heard of that. It's called AI. And that is really going to be an impact on all of these crimes in the future and make it much harder to detect. It's going to change how we do our fraud prevention messaging. It's really going to make changes, and it already is. And we'll talk about that, and you'll see a sample of it. So there's additional crimes, though. These are other ones that we don't talk about. And part of that is because usually the amounts of money that's stolen is not as much as what can be stolen in the ones I shared before. So be aware, there's just so many kinds of frauds, probably more kinds of frauds than there are violent crimes. So we're going to talk about some of these kinds of frauds now. And I do this a lot by videos because I love to bring in victim stories. But oftentimes I don't want to, make a victim have to sit through this 100 times, or these are people that were willing to come forward. So we're going to learn about them oftentimes through victim stories. So first one is going to be a romance fraud. And this is someone that you haven't met in person asks you for money. That's the kind we're talking about here. Signs of these kind of online imposter frauds, they're going to profess their love quickly. It's often called love bombing. They might claim to be overseas or just even in another state for business or military service. In the case of a man who's being defrauded and it's a woman, oftentimes they appear much younger. They might even have bikinis on a lot. I almost think that should be one of my red flags. They're going to ask for money and lure you off a dating site, lure you off that Words with Friends, lure you off LinkedIn, lure you off whatever that social media, Facebook or Instagram site you're on, and go on to a Telegram or Google Voice or some of these other ones. They're going to claim to need money at first again for emergencies or some other kind of business thing, and then increasingly it's going to go more and more. They're going to plan to visit you, but all these emergencies are going to happen every time it gets close. So this is kind of what we're talking about. And basically they are going to kind of look for someone they think might be lonely. They're going to gather information on them and present that ideal person, fake person. A lot of times they'll steal the image of somebody that they online, like social Facebook. They'll steal a bunch of pictures of someone and use that to try to defraud hundreds of people. I'm dealing now with a woman that believes that she's in a long-term romance with a man, and using different kind of Google searches and other kinds of search engines, we were able to find that he's on about 15 different accounts of different kinds, using different names and defrauding all kinds of people. She's heartbroken, still doesn't want to believe it's real. So we're working on that. So, once you're trapped by these people, it's very difficult sometimes to get out because of the promises that they make and the hope that you have of this wonderful future that you're going to have. So we're going to hear from a victim of this kind of fraud, so you can kind of see how they do this. Right. Get this on.
Initially, he would read my wall, I would read his wall, we would post
Can
things.
you all hear that?
He would like things, I would like things.
Yes, we can, Debbie.
Okay, thank you.
Then it got to, we would just share emails. We started sharing pictures. I knew that just based on the conversations that we'd had, that he was someone that I would like to meet. I felt a real soul connection with him right away. We sang to each other, we prayed with each other. We'd talk about what happened at church on Sunday. There wasn't an immediate talk about getting together. He was trying to finish up a job in California, and he needed some money to help finish that job up. And so I sent him. I thought about it long and hard. I prayed about it, and I've always been a very giving person. And I figured if I had money in the account, that I could send him some money, and he promised to have it back within 24, 48 hours. And I thought, could do that. No one would ever know, and I'd be okay. But, one thing kept happening after another. He'd need more money because he was coming in over budget. Things didn't get done on time. He needed a lawyer. He had to take a money loan, and it needed to be paid back. Part of me thinks that he's going to come through and pay me back what he owes me and, swoop in here, be the knight in shining armor. but it's just so absurd that there's a big part of me that doesn't believe that. And that is where this is all so pitiful, is because if he's a scammer, I've been so brainwashed and I've lost everything. It's all I had. It's any inheritance that I could have passed on to my daughter. The loss of money was my future, and knowing that I wouldn't have to work, that I could just make it to the ripe old age of whatever and be perfectly comfortable. The loss that I've suffered emotionally, I think, has even been more traumatic. I can't even imagine a man, a person that could be this bad. So I think of him, I can't think of him that way. My mind keeps me from thinking of him that way because there can't be a man in this world that could be this horrible, to have purposefully done what he's done to me. I don't want this to happen to anybody else. If they're real and if the love is real, they're going to want to see you as soon as possible. I mean, it's been 2.5 years and I still haven't seen his face.
So these are very devastating crimes. This woman, again, had $2 million stolen from her. And you can see there's a part of her that still so hopes he's going to swoop in. It's a very typical kind of example that we have. And again, there's help. There's support groups that are online. I have included at the end of this presentation that can help with people for free. AARP has a REST program 2 or 3 times a week that victims and family members can get on for all kinds of frauds. So we're starting to do a little bit more. Whoops. So we're starting to do a little bit more than we were. So we want you to do on these kind of frauds, end the relationship immediately and report it. Realize once you've sent that money, you're not going to get it back, no matter what you try to negotiate with them. Stop the communication, secure your accounts, and freeze your credit. We'll talk about that a little later. Notify your financial institutions of any accounts that they might have known about. I want you to assume that your computer or your cell may have malware installed, and they might actually be able to see everything that you're still doing online. We see that often with both the tech support frauds as well as with these romance frauds. Please, please, please report the crime and be prepared for future contact. They're going to try to reach you again. They're going to try to maybe impersonate somebody else, or maybe to be a recovery kind of thing where they impersonate law enforcement and say they're going to help you recover your fraud. And again, there are support groups. There is help for you if you are involved in something like this. And there's a lot of good online kind of groups through Facebook of victims helping other victims as well. The other one is that we're going to talk about government and other imposter frauds. This is where you get people saying they're from the IRS or Social Security. Sometimes it might be that your electricity is going to be off, or you have jury duty, or like I said, your bank is saying that there's a problem with your account. It might be Amazon telling you, or UPS telling you that there's a problem with the package delivery. A lot of times if it's Social Security or IRS, they'll give a badge number, which, agents don't really do that, but don't tell the scammers. They may have your last 4 digits of your Social Security number because they bought it on the dark web, right? You're told you owe money, or that your Social Security number was suspended and you've got to pay now or you'll be arrested. Put the money, they'll tell you to go out and get a gift card, and they'll actually stay on the phone with you. A lot of these fraud criminals will. Even when you go to the bank or the ATM or to Target to get that gift card, they'll stay on with you to make sure you do it and that they get the information. If you pay, you're going to find out it wasn't them. We see these a lot, especially on the phone with these grandparent and family emergency scams, and they're going to be increasing even more with AI. And again, if you get that on your phone and it says IRS or Social Security, just hang up. Don't even pick up the phone. Let it go to voicemail, because most of the scammers won't leave a message. So important message on that one. Another fraud fighter tip: put a freeze on your credit. A lot of people know about putting a fraud alert on, but most of us are encouraging now an actual freeze, not just on people that have been victims, but on everybody. I had 3 times last year where I got a letter in the mail saying that they couldn't open up the credit card I had been trying to get because there was a freeze on my account. Well, the problem is it wasn't me trying to open that credit card. It was a scammer trying to use my information to do so. So because I had a freeze on my credit, they weren't able to do that. So tips on how to do that, I have some resources listed here. The Identity Theft Resource Center is a wonderful place that you can go to, and people actually answer the phone. I really love them. We have a place where you can go onto annualcreditreport.com and get copies of your 3 credit reports, so that you can make sure that no one has open credit in your name. And there's the listing for the credit unions. So important message there. Have you been smished? So victims are also, it's a kind of phishing scam where people might get a text message, and we kind of alluded to that before, where they're going to ask for maybe account usernames. So maybe it's someone declaring you're a bank and that there's a problem with your account and they need to have your PIN number to get into that financial account. Well, you're never going to give your PIN number to anybody at all, or any other kind of sensitive information on a text message that you get. Treat your personal information like cash. And I have here just a couple of fun ones. Have I been pawned? And you see there's no letter A in there. You go on to haveibeenpawned.com. You can actually put your email address in and your phone numbers, and you can find out which of those kinds of things have been involved in some of the data breaches that are going on. And all they're trying to do is kind of sell you a place to keep your email, your account safe. So it's a safe place to go on there to do that. Lottery and sweepstake frauds, these we see a lot. Again, the Federal Trade Commission said it was one of the highest things that they're still seeing. I think a lot of these are still happening on the phone, social media, emails. Victims are actually told, they're actually impersonated. A lot of times Mega Millions or Publishers Clearinghouse, even though they might be in another country. Be aware that none of those businesses, Mega Millions nor Publishers Clearinghouse, will ever call you. They will never email you. They will never text you, the real ones. Victims are often going to be required to send money in advance for taxes, for fees, for couriers. Usually every time that involves money, it also involves spend a Mercedes for a long time. I don't know if that's changed recently. One time I had a guy said that he was told he was going to get 2 Mercedes, and they actually mailed him a Mercedes key for that supposed car that he had won. Realize that you never have to pay taxes or other fees in advance of winning something. Participation in a foreign lottery is actually against the law. A lot of these come out of Jamaica and places like Costa Rica. They often will have an area code of 876, but oftentimes they'll hide that area code and make it look like it's coming from places like Miami or even Las Vegas, because that's kind of a gambling center, right? And I have so many victims that have been involved in these kinds of frauds or are being manipulated for sometimes 2, 3, 4 years. And to realize that it is, they will eventually demand your life savings and ask that you borrow money from the people you know to get that grand prize. So be aware, Publishers Clearinghouse actually has a fraud reporting number that you can call them and tell them about this. I would also do that, as well as the Federal Trade Commission, but they can actually tell you why Publishers Clearinghouse did not call. I remember a man sitting out on his front porch one Friday waiting for that Publishers Clearinghouse prize patrol with their balloons and all to show up. And of course, they never did. So real quick, we're going to play just a few minutes of this on a lottery scam, because I think to understand just how mean these folks can get when you're not giving the money that they expect you to.
I get more calls than you would anticipate, and this one sounded like I had won something, congratulations and so forth.
The total value of the award is about 72 million.
72?
72 million. You're the first place winner. And the reason why they selected you to give you this amount, because I do some of your background check. I know that you was a judge, you was a lawyer, you was in the U.S. Navy, Homeland Security, and the basketball team, and all of those stuff. I do your background check.
In this particular case, I think my wife heard me having a conversation, and she was protesting in her own sweet way that my playing around with somebody like that don't string him along. Later, I don't know how the conversation turned sour, but it did. And at that point, he shifted gears, and instead of sweet talk, he began to threaten her.
Hey, I know you're playing around, right? You know what I'm going to do? I won't call you back. I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill your husband. I'm going to set your house on fire because you seem to be playing around and you doesn't know who am I. So listen, I'm not giving you any more warning. I'm just going to send out my guys and listen. Anytime you put back yourself in Washington, D.C., you'll be killed. Look, a sniper, I know you're home. You see, you live the place where you're home at. You live at a very lonely place. And the moment you arrive, I'm gonna put a shot in your head. I'm gonna burn your house down. I don't play.
And as time went along, I learned how significant the victimization of older people was, and that worried me. I was older myself enough to know, to be sympathetic with how older people without my maybe background experience might react to situation. The average older person doesn't get caught in a bind where they're the screws are turning on them. They think something good is happening. They want to believe it. They find out it's not going to happen. They've often paid some money in order to get something that was explained was needed in order to go take the next step and to get bigger sums of money coming their way. Older people like to think they're still valuable for one reason or another, regardless of what they've done. It was a game, whatever it was, they were able to be convinced that they were about to get something good to show they were still in the money.
So we're going to move on from that, but I wanted you to see that, and I have to kind of paraphrase this. We don't have a single case where these fraud criminals have come back and done any kind of attack or threatened people in person. Like I said, most of these criminals are overseas in some place. They're after your money. They're not there. This was just a threat to try to intimidate them to get more money out of them. So, of course, if you have something like this happen, you want to call 911 right away. I have had victims report money mules, pick up money. Wasn't done in a way of threatening. It's often just a courier there to get money from them. So I wanted to kind of paraphrase that, but I wanted you to see just how evil some of these folks are. And imagine somebody going through this and thinking that they're going to make all this money through a publisher's clearinghouse, and that's going to be money to help their grandson go through college, or maybe, you know, a nephew's surgery, and all these great things that they think they can help the family with, only to be faced with someone like this. Tech support frauds. Let's talk about that real quick. So we know that older adults are most vulnerable for this particular fraud, and it's the one most likely to succeed because it can happen in so many ways. The example I have here is you might get a warning on your computer, and sometimes all kinds of sounds go off like sirens and everything else, and that can be just a pop-up saying there's all big problems. I think most of us have had maybe something like that. It might be a phone call where someone is impersonating Apple or Microsoft and telling you that you have a problem with your computer. You might be going on having a problem with what you think is your computer, and you go on to a tech company online trying to find someone that can fix that problem, and you end up getting one of these fraud criminals that's advertising instead of a legitimate company. A lot of times they'll get on too and say that they're going to help you recover some money because you paid too much for your security program. And so they're going to help get your money back, and they'll want access to your bank account to be able to put that money in directly. We're seeing kind of an evolving now into a lot of these are what they call phantom hacking, which is basically the tech support person will say, oh my gosh, it looks like there are problems on your bank account. I'm going to put you in touch with a fraud person from Bank of America, Wells Fargo, whatever bank it is, or I'm going to put you in touch with this U.S. Marshal or this postal inspector, whoever, and they're going to help you because it looks like, oh my gosh, there's child porn on your looks like people are accessing that. All kinds of things are happening. So they'll put this person on, maybe it's a bank security person, and they're going to tell you that the money isn't safe in that account. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Be aware when these things happen. I kind of listed some guidance for victims on what to do if this happens. if you need to get it fixed, go local, don't go with somebody online. But there's all kinds of programs. Just keep your software up to date. And we'll talk a little bit about computer security in a little bit later. But I want to share the story. This is a kind of a sad one. This is Phyllis, and she was a victim of this kind of fraud too.
My name is Phyllis Weisberg. I'm a 90-year-old widow. I have 4 children, 4 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren, with another one on the way. I was the victim of an online scam. The scammers managed to get into my checking account. They removed $20,000.
Phyllis isn't alone. We are talking about a billion-dollar industry. And a key thing is that the over 60 population accounts for about 1/3 of those losses.
This all began when my computer came up with a flashing light that it was unable to use it, and a phone number from Microsoft with a big ad that something was wrong with the computer and that they could take care of it if I would just call this number. And I called that number and they answered Microsoft. They were there to help me. They were the scam department of Microsoft, which of course it was not.
Anytime someone says, I'm from Microsoft, I'm from this company, I'm from that company, if they're calling you and you haven't called them, then huge red flag, not legitimate, hang up.
The first thing was they warned me. This was the only warning that I got. Nothing, no physical threats or anything, but a warning not to discuss this on the telephone, because these bad guys could get in and hear all the conversations that were on the phone.
At the end of the day, scams are about psychological manipulation. And a key piece of psychological manipulation is getting people into what amounts to an isolated reality, which gives the attacker greater opportunity to shape and manipulate that sense of reality.
And that's when they presented me with, they sent me this list with the address of this foreign country and how to send a wire, which I had never in my life sent a wire before. I had no idea. And I thought, well, I'll go to the branch closer to home, where I always go, which is where I went. And that's where I had a very young fellow who I'd never met before in the bank. And he asked the same questions that they told me he would ask. Where is the money? Why are you doing this? And the answer was, it's a real estate venture, which was, of course, obviously not my idea. I had all the answers programmed for me, so I would give the right answers to him.
It's important to understand that Phyllis, to a degree, was kind of outgunned here, because we're talking about people who are professionals. They go in day after day and do nothing but phone tech support scams for 8 hours a day.
My first reaction was total embarrassment, that I would do anything that stupid. And actually it took me quite a while to get over this, that I was not the only one who was being taken like this. And all I can do is warn other people and just hope that this will help one person to avoid doing this. It would be a blessing to me to do it. My name is
So
Phyllis.
we'll stop with that, but I wanted you to, again, to see that. Real quickly, there are a lot of trends that are going on, and we're going to talk about just a couple of those, but AI certainly is a big one. I wanted to mention AI. The Senate Subcommittee on Aging just put out a brochure on emerging threats about AI, so that might be a helpful thing to go back and look at. But all of these are kind of ways that, again, good criminals use technology against us, and we have to be ready. So another fraud fighter tip that I want to talk about, these bank imposter frauds, which is kind of what happened with her. Gift cards, crypto payments, wiring money are the most common payment methods demanded by criminals. Important tip here. A lot of times when you go to a bank, if you say that you were scammed, and it happened like what happened to Phyllis there, the bank will say to that person, will you authorize the transaction even though you authorized it to an imposter? And they may not be able to refund your money. Versus if you're a fraud and a hacker gets into your computer and you had really nothing to do with it, oftentimes those kinds of things may be refunded. So I just wanted you to be aware. It's really difficult on these kind of situations, if you get involved in these kind of things, to sometimes get your money back from a bank. It's not like, a credit card charge where you would report it and your money's returned. I don't think we're spending enough time talking to people about this and how the devastating kinds of things that can happen when you find out that money isn't going to be returned, or the bank is holding you kind of liable for it. So I just wanted to kind of mention that. I think it's a really important message that we get out. I want you to hear real quick a family emergency fraud. We're almost done here. But this is actually, Bob Sullivan does a really neat thing. It's called the perfect scam. I've actually been on it as kind of their expert a couple times. But this is one where he talks about AI and what we're going to talk about, the family emergency scam. So let's just listen to a few seconds of this kind of fraud.
Hi, I'm Bob Sullivan, and this is The Perfect Scam. This week, we'll be talking with people about a new form of the grandparent scam, one that plays on victims' heartstrings by using audio recordings of loved ones asking for help abroad. What makes this new is that the voices are actually AI generated, and they sound pretty convincing. In fact, you're listening to one right now. I'm not really Bob Sullivan. I'm an AI generated voice based on about 3 minutes worth of recordings of Bob on this program. Sounds pretty convincing though, doesn't it?
Welcome back to The Perfect Scam. I'm your real host, Bob Sullivan. Today
So I won't go on with that, but I wanted you to kind of get to hear kind of
we
how
are bringing you
close,
a
Hi,
how close those can be, and how we've really got to be careful now, because someone that you think might be, someone in your family that's in trouble, or a celebrity that's contacting you, as a special kind of thing, it's probably not really that person. In family emergency frauds, it's often a grandchild that might be in trouble. They might be in jail or a hospital, or if they're traveling, they might even be kidnapped. They're going to have oftentimes another party, maybe a doctor, an attorney, do a real negotiating for them. They might say, oh, my nose is broken, so maybe I don't sound quite so good. But basically, they're going to demand money right away to get that. And oftentimes it's going to be through the crypto machines, the ATMs, or gift cards. All they need is a short audio clip of your family member's voice. And we know a lot of kids are on, TikTok now, they're on, Instagram, places like that, to get that, and a voice cloning program. And it's very cheap to kind of be able to do these kind of things now. Don't trust the voice, don't trust the video. There's also deep fake videos that can make it look like it's your person, but it's really not. Experts are suggesting having a family safety code. Don't have it like your dog's name or something that they could find on social media, but something that only your family would know, as a special code to know that you're really talking to that family member. So be aware, this is one of those crimes where, again, scammers are going to try to keep you on your cell phone until that transaction is complete, even having it up to your ear while you're driving and while you're, making that transaction, buying that gift card or going to the bank. So this also is a crime that includes the couriers that come to pick up the money at your home. So be aware of that they have local people that are often doing that. Oftentimes these couriers don't even know that that's what they're doing, being involved in a crime. Cryptocurrency fraud, we're not going to talk much about this, but it's huge now as well. Cryptocurrency can be used as an investment. We're hearing about just great returns that people are getting on that. Oftentimes the scammer might pretend to be a celebrity. They might pretend to be a love interest who's got an uncle or somebody who's doing really well with this cryptocurrency market and promising big payouts. It can also be used again as a payment fraud. So I wanted you to be aware of that. And then I'm going to kind of finish up with the money mules. Oftentimes victims are recruited to be money mules, especially once their money has been stolen and they're kind of have no more money. It's called kind of an unwitting money mule. And what happens is they kind of become that go-between to further transfer stolen money, stolen property, packages, drugs, any of these kinds of things. Oftentimes these fraud criminals will ask someone to open a new bank account and forward money that's actually been stolen by other victims onto other victims or onto the criminals that might be here in the United States, and that money eventually makes its way overseas. And also, I've had cases where victims are accepting packages from people under different kinds of ploys, and they forward those packages again to other victims or the fraud criminals. I had one victim send night goggles to Nigeria. I can't even imagine what those were used for. They really like to get Apple gift cards and Apple products. Be aware these people are being prosecuted in the United States. So important to report this. So important if you find somebody that's a victim in this, to get them to stop it. And I think postal inspectors are doing a wonderful job on this. And I'm going to show one of these videos because I think it's so important. People that are money mules are just really need to be aware of much more of what they're doing. So let's hear from this.
All of a sudden I got a priority letter in the mail. And inside this envelope was a letter with instructions, what I had to do. And there were 2 money orders. They were each over $900.
Are you mailing cash to someone you don't know at the request of someone else? If so, it's possible that you are a money mule. Hi, I'm Andrea Avery, United States Postal Inspector. You may have heard the term money mule, but what exactly is it? A money mule is someone who transfers or moves money illegally obtained from victims of fraud. If you're mailing cash or packages at someone's direction, you're probably serving as a money mule and enabling fraudsters to harm others. Some people become money mules after being told they've won a sweepstakes, or they meet someone online or on a dating app, or they are responding to an online job opportunity.
They needed someone to send packages, so I sent my information in.
Although the stories vary by scheme, scammers ask the person to receive money or packages from people they don't know and forward them on to others they don't know. Some money mules know they've been recruited to support criminal activity, but others are unaware that they are helping criminals profit.
Receive packages at my home and then send them to wherever they tells me to send them. I noticed that all the packages that they sent to me went to Russia.
Anyone can be approached to be a money mule, but criminals often target students, those looking for work, or those on dating websites. Don't be a money mule. It's illegal and you can be prosecuted, even if you don't know you're committing a crime.
So we'll kind of stop there. Cyber hygiene, I'm not going to talk a lot about this, but I want you to be aware there's a lot of really good websites that people can go to actually for webinars on how to be safer online. Just, use what they call multi-factor or two-factor authentication. That means like if you're online with a bank account that you have to kind of verify who you are, getting a text or an email message that you put in the code. You want to make sure that you don't use the same password for every one of your accounts. Keep different ones. Make sure that you're updating your privacy settings and all your systems are updated. Just some things like that. And keep your dating local. I think that's one of my biggest things. If you go on and have friendships or anything, make sure that they're local. Would be some of my biggest tips on that. Again, the National Elder Fraud Hotline, I want to repeat that, how important that is, can be a source to help anybody in any situation. There are supports that can help. The ARP one, and family of all fraud crimes. This network has a free romance imposter crime thing for victims. It's a 10-week free session for any age. Really important on that. Connections are so important on this. No matter how old we are, we need a purpose and a reason to get up in the morning. Let's not be that to talk to a scammer. Don't give up on people that are involved in these kinds of things. It often took them weeks or months to get into it. It's almost like losing weight. You may not do it the first time you try, but support them in their efforts. And then connecting with others, I wanted to get this screen in there. There's so many kinds of online classes and meeting groups, especially for people that are in different kinds of nursing facilities that can be really helpful. Cyber Seniors is a great one. We actually have people that can help you with your tech kind of issues. There's virtual memory cafes for people with dementia to connect with each other in a safer environment, as well as for victims with intellectual disabilities. So I wanted to share that as kind of a thing that we do. And then I also wanted to talk about the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. This is more for you professionals, but be aware that they have these online guides that you can get for free. Trusted contact person, planning for our own diminished capacity, and how to manage other people's money. And again, the Consumer Financial Protection has a lot of good guides on dealing with nursing homes and assisted living kinds of communities. And then that's something on presentations. If you give presentations to the public, there's some good sources on how to do them. So thank you. Questions? Sorry, I went a little over.
This was amazing, Debbie. Absolutely, positively amazing. So full of information. And we always try to be mindful of the time. So just if anybody needs to leave, I want to make sure that you're aware. Debbie, can we get these slides and can I post them onto our website? website. Okay, so know that, everybody. These will be on the Illinois Ombudsman website page. You can get to it through the Department on Aging's website and the Resident and Family Support Council page. So know that you can access it all through there. And I just found it extremely, extremely informational. And I feel like everybody needs to know this. I personally would be passing this information on to other professionals, as well as to families and friends and people that I also work with. So thank you, Debbie. I am going to go ahead right now, and I will stop the recording just for the recording's sake, but we can open up the lines because people may have some questions that they would like to ask. So I just want to thank you publicly again, Debbie, before I stop the recording. Thank you so much. And know that this information, if you're watching this on the YouTube video, is posted at the Illinois Ombudsman's website page that you can access through YouTube.